Voice of Grace-Allstar, where we tell stories around us from the perspective of children. Today, we are privileged to have author Kathleen Blasi with us. Please welcome Miss Kathleen to our interview.
Welcome.
Welcome, Miss Kathleen.
Hi.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction.
When and why did you decide to become a writer? And what inspired you to choose children's literature creation instead of any other types?
Well, I decided to be a writer when I fell in love with writing, which is about when I was maybe a little bit older than you boys and girls. I remember specifically I was in 4th grade because I wrote something and my teacher told me it was good. And so I thought, my first thought was, it is? And my second was, well, maybe I can be a writer. And so I began to write in private. I was a very shy person. I didn't let anybody read my writing. But that's when I began to write. And when I decided that I wanted to be, when I say I'm an author, I think an author is anyone who's written a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they're proud of it, which means you have to revise. So I decided to pursue that career when I was about 30 years old, and my children are the ones that inspired me. I just would read books with them all the time. So I thought, maybe I can do this too. And I really love children's literature because there's so much to look into and to hope for. And I love that stories, usually for children, have a happy ending or a satisfying ending, I should say. Because some children's stories are sad, right? I've written some stories that are sad, and really my goal as a writer is to make my reader feel something, whether that is joy or sadness, because that means that I'm connecting with them. So I'm going to keep writing for kids, even as I get older and older.
Do you remember the first book you published?
I do, and I have it right next to me. I'm going to show it to you. It's called A Name of Honor, and this book was inspired by my grandmother. It's actually considered historical fiction, but it really is based on a true story of my grandmother's immigration from Sicily, which is just south of Italy, to America in 1920. She was a very, very quirky person. We call her a character. If anybody ever says, oh, you're such a character, be careful, you might end up in a book. So this was my very first. This was so special to me, Gloria, because it was a family story. And by learning, I had to do a lot of research for this book. And as I did the research, I learned more and more about my grandmothers. I learned more and more about my own family.
So every book reflects part of the author's life. Do you think you are the child or the mom in the book?
That is such a thoughtful question. I would have to say I'm more the mom in the story. Yeah, so that's a really great question. I definitely struggle with trying to balance my work life and my life with my family, and never wanted to say no to my children when they asked me to do things like, can you color, or can you lay down with me when they're going to sleep? Never said no, because I knew the time was precious. So in terms of Milo, so Milo is an only child, and I am one of 7 children, and I'm the 6th. So I never got as much attention from my mom as Milo gets from his. But yeah, that's really neat. I'm sure there's a little bit of me in both of them, but I think probably more so the mom.
You are also actively involved in the work of teaching and encouraging children to write. Do you prefer to teach or to write?
I love both. So one of the things I love so much about my job as a writer is that I get to go into schools and connect with students, oftentimes who don't see themselves as writers. So that's very, very gratifying when I can connect with children who then can see themselves as writers.
And will the children actually bring some inspiration into your creation?
They sure do. So there's 2 parts to that question. I'll answer the second part first. When I was writing A Name of Honor, my younger daughter was in 2nd grade, and she was in a multi-age classroom, and I got to sort of pilot the book in the classroom. So I actually made changes to this manuscript well before it was a book based on some conversations I had with those students, and they are in the credits page of my book.
The vast universe and starry sky has always been one of mankind's most desirable places to explore, full of mysteries. So, did you create this story because of your interest in the universe and starry sky? And then, why did you choose a space theme for this book?
Well, Helen Wu could probably help me answer this one, but I'm going to give it a shot. My extent of being fascinated with outer space was I love stargazing. I will go, before I go to bed each night, I look outside and see if it's a clear night. And if it is, I go out on my deck and I just love looking at the stars. I always have ever since I was a child. And my family vacationed in the mountains of New York State. And it's very dark up there with very little light pollution, we'll say. And we could see the stars and we would go for walks at night. So I fell in love with stargazing as a child. In terms of outer space in general, that was really the extent of it, Ethan. And in terms of, so how did Milo's Moonlight Mission become this space story? Milo's Moonlight Mission began as really a family who wanted to go outside and watch a meteor storm. And when I wrote this story, there was no mention in any of my text that we're going to go into Milo's imagination. In fact, the first sketches I saw of the story, I'm going to read you the first page. Takeoffs, blastoffs, walks on the moon. For Milo and his crew, the sky is the limit. So this is what it looks like, as you know. However, the first version of that had Milo standing on a chair in the living room, like ready to kind of jump off the chair. Very, very realistic. Very realistic. It was Yahoo Press who published the book, Helen Wu and the artist who did the pictures, who had the idea to delve right into Milo's imagination. So we really get a sense for that Milo loves outer space. And I think that you clearly get that, Ethan, as you can tell by what the art shows in the book. And after they decided to go into Milo's imagination, I did change some of the text to choose words that really reflected that. So I never in my wildest dreams thought that this book would show a little boy in a rocket ship. That is the beauty of turning the story over to the artist and the art director at a publishing company, because their vision of what the story can be different from mine. And it can actually be even better.
Do you have any advice for other young kids that would like to grow up and become an author?
I do. I have 2 pieces of advice. And the first one is read. Read as much as you can, because reading is the workout for your brain. Plus it's fun. I love to read. But what reading does is your eyes and your mind are seeing words on the page. New words used differently, and it's kind of like when you warm up before you play soccer, or when you do chords before you play your instrument. It helps you play better, and reading helps you be a better writer. So the second part is are you ready for this? Just write. Write as much as you can. Write for yourself, write for others. When you get to the point where you want to be a published author, you will be much better off if you share your work with people who will help you make the writing better. I have 3 writing friends who see all of my work, and they tell me what they like about it, and they tell me what could be better. And that is a really, really important part of being a writer, is being able to listen to criticism that can help make your stories better.
At the end of this book, you told the story of watching a Leonide meteor storm with your family as a child. What kind of experience was it?
I watched it as an adult, and my children watched it as children. So I was the Leonide meteor storm that inspired Milo's Moonlight Mission. Happened, I believe it was in 1999. Imagine that, 1999. You were just a twinkle in someone's eye at that point. But we went outside, so my children remember this very well, and I do too. So I wrote about it after we went outside at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's very cold. I live in New York State, so it's cold over here. And I wrote about it and I wanted to turn it into a story. But I did, as I said earlier, love to watch the stars when I was a child too. So that definitely helped me make the decision to go outside as an adult and watch that Leonid meteor storm that inspired the stories, because I always loved watching the stars when I was a child.
Did the Leonid meteor storm inspire you to write the story?
Yes, it did. It did. I didn't, Amy, I didn't even really know what it was. I just remember, like, Milo and Mom heard this on the news. Same thing. I heard it on the news. I read it in the paper that this was going to be a storm that it happens about every 100 years of this type, this magnitude, as many meteors as there were per hour. So we did, and yes, we did hear about it on the news, and we did set our alarm clocks, and away we went. We didn't, the part that Milo does where he gets out of bed to help Mom because she's running out of time. He thinks she's not gonna have enough time. I made that up because we weren't worried about that at the time. But I did know that in order to help my readers feel who Milo really is, do you ever, with any adult in your life, are you ever wishing that you had more time with them? Sometimes do they seem a little bit too busy?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I remember feeling that way too when I was a child. So I wanted my young readers and my adult readers to relate to the problem that Milo has, which is, boy, I love my mom. I want to do these things with her. I want to do some things with her, but she's always so busy. But they do certainly make the best of it.
What sources helped you research about this topic?
About this topic, I did a lot of reading. I know I read some things online, but then I also interviewed the director of our local planetarium. I wanted to make sure that my author's note was accurate. I wanted to make sure, I knew what I had seen. So my research with my own eyes and the experience, I wrote it down immediately, which I want to share that piece of advice with you, boys and girls. Write everything down, even if you think, oh, what am I ever going to do with this? Keep a little notebook. You just never know. So my research, I like to think of, I'll call it my easy research, and that I just do by paying attention to the world around me. So I think we can all do that. We all have that piece in our research toolbox, I think. And then in terms of actually how a meteor storm occurs, I did the research mostly for the author's note and I wanted to make sure it was right. So like I said, I did talk with actually a meteorologist and the planetarium director, both. As a writer, I just I want to get everything right. I don't want to get anything wrong. And if I put something in a book, and someone who's an expert, say, in meteorology, or astrophysics, or an astrophysicist, I don't know, I would really feel terrible if I got something wrong. So I do want to make sure that my facts are correct.
Were you as curious and interested in space as Milo was when he was young, like he was in the book?
I think that Milo is a little more curious about outer space than I was as a child. I feel like I'm more curious about it now as an adult, to be honest.
In this book and your other works, you're responsible for the writing part, but all our other picture book authors that we have interviewed are both illustrating and writing. So I'm just curious, do you write the story first and then find somebody else to draw it? Or do you do the opposite?
Write the stories, and then I submit my text, kind of like this, to the publisher, but I send it electronically. And they find the illustrator. So with Milo, they had somebody in mind who could bring something imaginary to the story. And I remember when Helen, who first told me that in her very early email, that they were looking for an illustrator who was more, I think the word Helen was imaginative, and I thought, why? But that's because the whole fantasy element wasn't part of the story yet, at least not in my mind's eye. So that was really, really neat to see why they picked Petronela Dostalova. and it works. I think it really works. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that there are just artists who bring, you know, another layer to our stories. You know, they bring, Petronela is telling another whole story. We know so much more about Milo through her art that goes beyond my text. Traditional publishing model, which is an author submits the text, publisher picks an illustrator. That's the order.
Why did you come up with the theme of always spending time with the family and kids?
I think time with people we love is something we can never have enough of. So by making this important to Milo and his mother, because his mom definitely wants to spend time with him, but she has things that she has to do. So I felt that people could relate to that.
What steps did you go through to make this book perfect?
Is it perfect? I'm glad that you think so. You know, even when I see a book of mine that's published, every single time when I read it, I go, oh, I wish I changed a word or whatever. But there's lots of steps. And one of my favorite things about being a picture book author is that when I get an idea, I take a big piece of paper and I brainstorm ideas about how I want to tell the story. But then I also draw. I told you I'm not an artist, but in the privacy of my own office, I do draw little sketches. I make squares that could be each page, and I know where I'm going to turn the page, and if it works and it doesn't, and it's really very visual part of the process. So I say I'm not an artist, but I really need to do that with the book. It's like a puzzle to me.
Since Milo is helping his mom do chores, what is your opinion on children having to do household chores?
I think it's wonderful when children do household chores because we all live together. We all contribute to all the fun when living together. So we all have to, if we contribute to helping each other at home or at school, that allows us to find more time to do the things that we want to do.
Can you tell us what your next work is about?
I would be happy to. I have a book that is out with some publishers right now being considered, and it's about takes place during World War II, and it's about two friends, one who is Japanese American, and the other is blonde, blue-eyed, Mary Frances, English American, and they're best friends. And then something happens and their parents don't want them to play together anymore. And it's just based on the fact that one of them is Japanese American and she's bullied. And it's about friendship, and it's about standing up for people who matter to us. I have another book that I'm working on that is centered on my Italian heritage. My mom is Italian, and it's a poem and a picture book that is about how we went to my grandmother's house on Sundays for her sauce and how she passed on those traditions to me as her granddaughter. And another historical middle grade novel about a little boy who works on the USS Constitution in 1797. So someone asked me about research. There's a lot of research for that one. I love doing research because I love doing reading. In fact, I do more research than writing when I write a historical novel. I very much appreciate that you are taking the time to chat with me tonight. This has been, I just met you, but I'm very, very proud of you because you boys and girls are super sharp, super respectful, and very, very thoughtful in your questions. I very much appreciate it.